Hello everyone, welcome back to Airbus What's It Doing Now, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about FLS, the FMS landing system. This has to be about the fourth time I've done this video now in different formats, and I've had problems with each one. My last attempt was on my company iPad, and then I realised at the end of it that I couldn't download it or send it anywhere because the file was too big, and there wasn't the option of an iCloud link either because it's so locked down you can barely use the damn thing. Anyway, arguably it's probably not meant for that, so perhaps my own fault. So here we go, fourth or fifth time. Let's get this video published and out to you guys. So FLS, this is different to SLS, which was I think one of the most recent videos that we did. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link up there for you to click on, which you can click on at any time, or just scroll through the videos to SLS. That was the sort of GPS landing system, the SBAS landing system, which of course was using GPS for the vertical profile as well. Slightly different here, the FLS, because it is so not a type of approach, it's a guidance, it's an FMS guidance approach rather than a different type of approach, and of course it's also barosensitive, which the SLS largely takes that away. Okay, so not to get the two confused. Big caution here as well that you may not yet be approved to use it. Your company, by means of online learning and or recurrent simulator sessions, may then require you to complete those objectives before actually operationally using the FLS. Even if your aircraft is equipped with it, it will likely be equipped with Final App and FLS. I'll talk to you more about later on and how we deselect FLS, as that would be the default approach for non-precision approaches. I haven't gone into a deep dive on this for two reasons really. One, because it's essentially a simple system. It's just a guidance method from Airbus. And secondly, how to use it, how your company wants to use it, and the contingency procedures, etc., are going to be largely dependent on your airline. So I don't want to go into that too much, but you can read that up in your ops manual. It's pretty straightforward, and they'll cover it in your training in any case. So the purpose of this is just to have a good broad overview on FLS, so that when you come to it and you hear it spoken of, it's not going to be too alien. So what is it? Well, FMS landing system, like I mentioned earlier, it's a guidance mode for just about all non-precision approaches, including NDB, VOR DME, lock only approaches, lock back course approaches, VOR, etc., and RMP approaches. What it can't do is curved approaches, RMP AR. Primarily, I think, because you can't use a inbound course more than 50 degrees off of the runway QDM. So I think that sort of radius turns, etc., would put it outside of the FLS remit. So basically all non-precision approaches except RMP AR. So very useful bit of kit. And of course the SLS, which I referred to earlier on, was for RMP approaches. Again, company specific as to whether you use LNAV and VNAV or just LNAV minima in that respect. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about SLS anymore. It's FLS only from here on. It's been around for quite a while, I think, maybe 2010, maybe slightly earlier than that. It's been available on the A380, I think, from birth. And it's been available for the 350, and of course, like all of these enhancements, they eventually work their way down to our little puddle jumpers, the 320. So that's why we're seeing it now, and that's why I'm talking about it, and you'll start to see it and on your aircraft if you haven't seen it already. How does it work? Well, essentially, the profile uses FMS computed data as approach guidance mode for lateral and vertical path. It comprises an anchor point, which is a fixed point in space, usually about 50 feet above the runway threshold. Course and slope on the inbound leg. That's a QDM and a slope path, 3 degrees generally. Could be more. And what happens then is the multi-mode receiver, the MMR, computes a localizer and glide slope, and will then on the PFD show you deviation depending on where the aircraft is in relation to that localizer or pseudo localizer and pseudo glide path beam. Essentially, much like you'll see as an ILS. The only difference with FLS is it doesn't help the FMS compute position. One of the inputs for the mixed IRS position and computed data position for the FMS and for the aircraft is it does actually use ILS data for that to update itself. Well, it doesn't do that on the FLS, of course, because it's using its own data in order to create that localizer and glide slope. So a small, subtle difference there. So that's basically what it is. You know, an anchor point, an inbound QDM, an approach path angle, and a deviation from that inbound QDM as a localizer, and the deviation up and down of that anchor point inbound pseudo glide path will show you the deviation in the flight deck, and the flight guidance system will then just follow it like it would do a normal ILS. Now the PFD, and I've got some illustrations here if I haven't said already to accompany this briefing, just to show you what that looks like. But essentially, and one of the great benefits of FLS is to reduce workload for the flight crew, to have a familiar presentation and increase situational awareness. So even the most complex non-precision approaches, some wacky NDB approaches, I know we don't see an awful lot of those anymore, will look pretty conventional on the FMS, on the PFD, as a sort of conventional localizer and glide slope presentation. I'll try and pick an illustration here for you. Now the big difference here, which you'll notice, is the appearance of the glide path and localizer diamond. Now, with FLS guidance, they're double diamonds, basically to say that it's it's presented and interpreted by the FMGC. So both the glide path and the localizer diamonds are double diamonds to indicate that you are in F lock and F glide slope. Okay. Now the only exception to that is localizer only approaches, and I'll show you how we set that up later on, because there is an important difference with that. If it's a localizer only approach, it's one thing, but if it's a localizer approach because the glide path is inoperative, then that's slightly different. But what's common to both of those is if the aircraft is using a genuine localizer signal, you will have your conventional single magenta diamond. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. So typically for a non-precision approach like an NDB, you will have double diamonds for glide path and localizer, glide path and lateral deviation I should say, but if for a localizer approach, it will see a single diamond because it is using a conventional localizer beam. How you set that up I'll show you a little bit later on. Advantages, well, like I say, just able to fly just about all non-precision approaches with ILS-like presentation, reduces pilot workload, better situational awareness. It's automatically selected when an FLS compatible approach is selected in the FMGC, and that's the thing that you have to watch out for, because of those latest FMS fits that have this capability, the default setting will be FLS, and you'll need to manually select that in the approach guidance. I'll show you how you do that in a minute. Also, note that the glide path is corrected for temperature, so anything outside of ISA, the FMS profile, glide path profile, will be corrected for temperature, which is useful function. So flying an FLS approach, well, it's really quite straightforward. You select the non-precision approach that you are going to fly in the FMS. When cleared for approach, you press the approach push button on your FCU. The FMA shows final app in the landing category. Now, it might show, I'll come on to this later on, final app and raw, or it might say raw only, but as I say, we will discuss that later on. Now, when you press approach, you'll get final app. If there's any downgrade to the capability, then you'll get final app and raw or raw on the PFD, but you'll also get it in the ECAM status, which will show you any downgrade. Okay, but more of that in just a minute. So you press the approach push button. Hopefully you'll see F app in the landing category, where you normally see Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, etc. And then in the lateral and vertical profiles, where you normally see lock and glide path, you'll see F glide slope, F lock. Okay, so FMS glide slope, FMS lock. And then the same presentations there on, when you get capture, you'll get locks, F lock star, and you'll get F glide slope star, and they'll be boxed once they're captured. All almost identical to what you would expect to see on an ILS, which I think is a great thing about this system. Now, I mentioned to you about lock being slightly different. Lock is used if the glide path is unserviceable. Okay. Now, if you've got this available in the FMS, you would just press lock for your approach. No problem at all. If lock only approach isn't available in the FMS, then what you have to do then is deselect the glide path in the FMS RadNav page, and I think I've got an illustration here which shows you what that looks like. And what happens then is it then forces the flight guidance to use glide slope from the FLS or the MMR, and decouples the glide path function basically, and then you have the lock and F glide slope. Okay, hope that makes that sense. So really straightforward. Again, you press the approach push button when cleared. You will see a slightly different presentation on the PFD, which I mentioned earlier on. The approach capability remains F app, but if the localize is conventional, lock is conventional on the PFD, and then, as I say, because the glide path is this pseudo glide path generated by the FMS with the anchor point, because you've deselected it in the FMGC, you'll see FGS, so FMS glide slope. So lock will be conventional because it's using the lock, a single diamond, and then you'll have F glide slope. Okay, so that's the only difference really for doing localizer only approaches, and the difference is there if you've got lock. If you don't have a lock only approach, then you have to deselect the glide path in the FMS approach in the RadNav page. Good. Also note the lateral deviation is a single diamond. I've already mentioned that, so no need to get too bogged down with that again. So a few extracts here from the FCOM and FCTM. Again, please consult your own manuals, especially when it comes to Ops B. I know that we are getting more and more aligned now with Airbus. I know we are in particular, but your company may have its own nuances as regards to, particularly with contingency procedures and PM call-outs for deviation, and the point at which you'd go around as well. I don't want to quote those, okay, because they may be company specific. So when the LS push button is pushed, then the FMA presents the landing category as, I said we've mentioned this now, F app, which is what hopefully we will see, F app plus raw, or raw only. Okay, so F app and raw only are downgrades in the system. Also, the ECAM status will show you the downgrade of the FLS system. Okay, particularly if you've had any upsets on the aircraft and ECAM procedures to do, the end result on the status might be a downgrade in the FLS system. Now onto this final app plus raw in the landing capability. If you get that, then you must monitor raw data on the ND. If you get raw only, then if raw only, VOR, NDB, or glide path is out, or lock only, for any one of those non-precision approaches, if it's raw only, then the LS push buttons must be off, and you must then use track FPA. That's going to be a pretty bad day at the end of the day, isn't it? So if you've got FAP, happy days. If you've got FAP and RAW, then you monitor the raw data. If it's RAW only, turn the LS push buttons off, and then you've got to use basic modes for your lateral and vertical. That's your track FPS. That's like the old days, isn't it, really? Be careful to make sure, obviously, you're approved before you fly it. Final app must be selected in the performance approach page, as FLS will be the default. So if you're not approved and you're flying one of these new spanky aircraft, make sure if you're doing a non-precision approach, you deselect FLS and you have final app as your default mode for non-precision approach. If the inbound course, is greater than 50 degrees off the runway QDM, then it won't qualify as an FLS approach, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you can't do RMP AR approaches. PM calls out any excessive deviations. What those deviations are, I'm going to leave that up to you. Standard autopilot disconnect for non-precision approach, it's in the FCOM limbs as 250 feet. Downgrades, etc. Again, I'm going to leave that up to you to pick the bones out of that for your for your benefit. One other area I wanted to discuss is the intercept from above procedure. For these non-precision approaches flown with the FLS, it is standard and conventional. The usual procedure as written down by selecting a higher altitude and appropriate vertical speed, appropriate configuration, making sure that the approach push button is selected to re-intercept the glide path. I will also put a video link up the top for a video I released quite recently, which involved inappropriate mode reversion during a go-around for an intercept from above procedure, because obviously this FLS system will be just as susceptible to that for those that haven't seen that video. So yeah, just a quick link here. The intercept from above procedure is conventional for the FLS approaches. Thank you. Because I think that's pretty much Airbus driven, but in terms of your deviation and when you go around, I'm just going to leave that up to you. I don't really want to discuss that. GNSS approaches, LNAV, VNAV, again, it does go on to talk a little bit about that, but in terms of deviation, 1 dot, half dot, cross-track error, etc., I'm going to leave that up to you, because I'm pretty convinced that's going to be specific to your airline. Okay, right. So I hope you don't mind that, but I think that's probably the safest, the best way to approach it. How do you know if your aircraft is fitted? So assuming you've gone through the training and your airline is approved and you are approved as crew, how do you know that your aircraft is fitted with FLS? Well, it may well be in your aircraft config summary. But if it's fairly new to your airline, as it is for us, it might be distributed by other means. It could be such as your OFP notes or briefing notices to crew. May well be in your standard aircraft spec. It might be in your notice to crew in the tech log as to what it doesn't have. Okay, but again, you will be familiar with how your company gets that information out to you. So briefing the day for your aircraft acceptance, you want to know what your aircraft has got, whether that's in the aircraft config summary or whether that's been distributed to you by other means. Obviously, it's important that you know if you have that aircraft fitted to your aircraft, especially if you plan to fly a non-precision approach, and obviously you are as crew authorized and trained to use it by means of decided by your company. Guys, that's all I have to really say on FLS. I hope you have found it useful, and hopefully some of the illustrations have been of use, just to put some meat on the bone there for you. Essentially a really simple system, really improves situational awareness, reduces work lag, gives us a very familiar presentation on the PFD, much like an ILS. It does have its limitations, of course, like most of these things. So will obviously require careful setup, consideration and briefing, especially contingency procedures in the event of downgrades. But essentially, this thing just puts an anchor point on the runway, draws a line, which I think actually can be intercepted up to about 100 miles away, not that you would need to, and then looks at the aircraft's position both vertically and laterally and presents that on the PFD in an ILS-like format, which is pretty super, really, isn't it? Great stuff. Guys, if anybody out there is already operating FLS in your company, in your airline, and you could add anything to this video, then please get in touch, either with me directly, by notes in the comments section, of your experience of it, what you like about it, what you don't like, and any operating tips that you can give us would be fantastic. All useful to share each other's experience, and we can all learn and benefit from it. So once again, thanks for tuning in. Keep the plate spinning, stay safe, and I'll look forward to seeing you on another episode of Airbus What's It Doing Now in the near future. Thanks very much. Take care, and bye for now.